Hi, everybody, and welcome to Aloud. I am Jessica Strand, the Senior Director of Public Programs and Strategic Engagement. And it's great to all see you here for this special program that actually my colleague curated. His name is Todd LaRue, and he'll be out to sort of introduce more of this. So the program is produced in association with No Prior Art, which is a show that's closing very, very soon. Illustrations of Invention, an exhibition and citywide program series on invention, innovation, and creativity as part of the Getty's PST Art and Science Collide initiative. We have an exciting lineup for May and one last program in June. This Thursday, we're very pleased to host ACLU's National President, Deborah Archer, with her new book, Dividing Lines. On May 25th, in the afternoon, we are presenting author, essayist, and raconteur Jonathan Ames with Ted Danson and Mary Steenburgen. And at the Aratani on May 29th, we are co-presenting with Skylight Books, Ocean Vuong. For more information about Aloud's programming, go to lfla.org. For those not familiar with the Library Foundation of Los Angeles, we are a private, nonprofit organization devoted to fundraising, advocacy, and innovative programming in support of the Los Angeles Public Library. And speaking about advocacy, I know many of us are disheartened and concerned about the ongoing threats to education, the freedom of expression, and libraries. Our libraries represent the best of our ideals, welcoming all and providing free access to information and services that enrich, educate, and empower patrons. But a recent executive order threatens the Institute for Museum and Library Services, the only federal agency that supports libraries nationwide, including here in Los Angeles. IMLS, as it's known, funded grants enhance the Los Angeles Public Library's programs that improve mental and physical wellness for older adults, expand sensory-friendly spaces for neurodiverse youth, and promote play-based early literacy in Los Angeles. You can make a difference. To help protect libraries, call or write your representatives and tell your family and friends in other states to urge their congressional representatives to support IMLS funding. And thank you to the Library Foundation supporters and members who are with us this evening. If you are not yet a member or supporter, I hope you will consider joining to see more programs like this one and to increase critical access to information, resources, and technology to help Angelenos improve their lives and to fulfill their dreams. This is a crucial time to support nonprofits whose mission you believe in. You can support with a donation or by joining. And there you go. It's a little code to make it easy. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Aaron Fox Schiff, Deloitte, the Golden Globe Foundation, Steve and Judith Krantz Foundation, the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture, the National Endowment for the Humanities, Sharon Oxborough Endowed Fund for Aloud, Peck Endowment for Cultural Programs, Ralph M. Parsons Foundation, and of course, all the individual donors and members here. Now, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Todd LaRue, who will introduce tonight's program and its participants. Todd is the Library Foundation's Director of Special Projects and the curator of our current exhibition, No Prior Art, Illustrations of Invention. He's also the author of Also on View, Unique and Unexpected Museums of Greater Los Angeles. Please welcome Todd LaRue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. We're really excited for tonight's program. I know you are as well. And as Jessica mentioned, tonight's program is part of our special project, No Prior Art, Illustrations of Invention, citywide program series and a major exhibition in our Getty Gallery upstairs, all about invention, the meeting place of art and science, and the nature of human ingenuity in all its forms. And No Prior Art was originally inspired largely by our Central Library's role as an official patent and trademark resource center. We have here a lot of really critical resources for independent inventors. And it also was an opportunity for us to highlight and celebrate how this library and other great libraries of our country have increasingly become sites of active creation and invention, particularly with our fabulous makerspace DIY Octavia Lab downstairs on lower level 2, which makes a lot of creative work possible. The No Prior Art exhibition here contains a wide range of artwork, historical artifacts, stories at the intersection of these themes, everything from a really moving project highlighting prisoners' inventions to 19th century patent models, antique quack medical devices, and the Utopia Machine, which is a large-scale, newly commissioned artwork by Ellen Harvey that interprets library patrons' suggestions of what would make the world a utopia. So if you've not yet had a chance to see this, I hope you can come back in the coming days. Sadly, it closes this Sunday, so the clock's ticking on this one. And speaking of great exhibitions here at the Central Library, I also want to just shout out the great Chicano photographer Luis C. Garza, who's in our audience tonight. And yes, thank you. And of course, I hope you will have seen on your way into the auditorium tonight in the first floor gallery is an exhibition of his work that's on view until July 13th. So tonight's program, it's all about the art movement, philosophy, and marker of Chicano identity known as Rasquachismo. And we are delighted to have two of its most prominent ambassadors here in conversation. The Rasquache ethos and aesthetic is characterized by inventiveness, often in response to material limitations, but you all don't want to hear about it from me, so let's get to our speakers. Cheech Marin, who needs no introduction, is a multi-talented cultural icon, actor, comedian, director, musician, and a leading advocate for Chicano art. Best known, of course, as the legendary, half of the legendary duo of Cheech and Chong. He also built one of the finest private collections of Chicano art, and I hope you all know, and many have had a chance to visit the Cheech Marin Center for Chicano Art and Culture out in Riverside, which is part of the Riverside Art Museum, and a spectacular range of exhibitions and collection that they have to display out there. In conversation with Cheech tonight is Josh T Franco, a collector at large at the Smithsonian Institution's Archives of American Art. He joined the archives as the Latino Collections Specialist in 2015, and prior to joining the Smithsonian, he was an artist guide at Judd Foundation at 101 Spring Street, while completing his PhD in art history from Binghamton University on the relationship between Rasquachismo and minimalism in Marfa, Texas. So without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Josh T Franco and Cheech Marin.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We all
Right
love
back at you.
Cheech.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jessica, Todd, Library Foundation, for bringing us together again.
Maybe once more.
I'm going to give you some background, and we'll get into it. So Cheech and I have been having this conversation on and off for years about Rasquachismo. Many hours discussing it. Part of that was bringing Cheech's oral history into the Smithsonian's collection, where you can access it, doing a podcast together about it, and just looking at art, which has been one of the great pleasures. I tell everyone you're one of my favorite people to talk about art with.
You may live.
So today we're going to just keep having the conversation, and I can't wait to hear, what you all have to say and think about it as well. And Cheech, hear how you've developed thinking in the past few years. So since the last time we sat down, the museum opened. So maybe we'll start with, I'll give my definition of Rasquachismo, then you can give yours, and then we'll go more into the images. Mine is, I have a PhD, I'm all like smart boy, first generation. But I asked my grandmother, who watched me give a talk one day as a scholar, she was like totally mystified. How can you talk so much about this thing? And I said, well, what is it to you? And she said, if I was a little girl and my friend came to me and invited me to go get ice cream, but then we showed up and she said, I don't have any money, you have to pay, that's rasquachismo. So that's my pithy definition from my grandma. Cheech, what's yours?
Rasquachismo, it's stuff that you find because you don't have the money to find something else, to make your art. It's in the general world of art, it's called found objects, and it becomes an art, a process. For Chicanos, it was necessary to complete whatever project they were working on because starting artists, canvas and paints are very expensive. That's why all the early Chicanos were drawers, they with pencil or chalk or pastels especially. And so they had to make do with whatever they had and in an artistic way. That's the definition. Okay, we have an iron here, I think it was 7 iron, and what do we make out of this? How can we incorporate that into our piece of art and make it art, and insist that it's art? And so that's kind of the definition for me.
Or handkerchiefs and ballpoint pen if you're in in prison.
Prison art.
I'm inspired to rethink about that because this amazing exhibition.
When you're just a lonely pinto in la pinta.
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the things I want to talk about, Cheech, here and push further is, like you alluded to, and so what the images you see on the screen, everyone, it's alternating. There are images of artworks from Cheech's collection. One is a work by Amalia Mesa Baines, whose show is up at the Cheech now. Go see it. Amazing artist.
Please go see the show. It's really remarkable.
She's incredible. And then alternating in that, Cheech, I don't think you've seen these either, is I just put photographs from my grandfather's backyard because he was always out being a rasquache in the yard. He made this fake porta potty. For the cousins. So, but that beautiful...
I get it.
That continuum between the museum, the fine art world, like where things would be called found object or assemblage, and the everyday or the out in life. And in Riverside, I always think of the path between the Cheech and Theo's Tacos, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you thought about that? Like, that border that you're crossing, and that Rasquachismo just crosses.
Well, it crosses all the time. It depends on what you're working on and how you want it to appear. At first, it was necessary to complete some form of art, and then it became the object of making art, as combining these found objects in rasquachismo, and to your guitarists, their whole life look for their tone. Different guitarists have different tones you can hear right away when they're playing. So you wanted to kind of have an individuality so they can say right when they see that your art, oh, that's Joe Smith or Jose Smith, whoever it is. But it's the distinguishing quality that you had the imagination to take something off the street and put it in something that's being framed and put it on the wall and maybe eventually in a museum. And that's the art of it, to find out what is that object. Is it a tricycle? Is it something that I find in the dirt? Is it a part of a car? That's and so then it becomes its own field of art. That is specifically Chicano and generally found art.
Mm-hmm. And Amalia is one artist who, especially through the form of the altar, which is both in yards, in kitchens, in homes, in bedrooms, and she's about that very specific art form. She's given it another name, Domesticana, which is feminist revised rasquachismo. And what's been your experience in bringing that into the museum?
I've known about Amalia for ever, and I never saw any of her work in person. She was always up in the Bay Area, San Francisco, and altars, I get it, but it didn't particularly attract me. But we have this show up at the Cheech right now of her installations, and they're spectacular. I mean, they're spectacular. It closes in August. So anybody that's thinking of going to the Cheech at some time or another, please go there before August. And the upstairs show, which is our revolving show of artists, and they're kind of a retrospective of them, is up right now. Amalia Mesa Baines. And she's a trip. she's one to talk to. But these installations, you know, I have a really kind of, I don't know what you want to call it. I trust my instinct on art, you know. And when I saw all these installations for the first time and live and in one place, I was flabbergasted. You know, I've seen a lot of art, and this is really good. If you can get out there before August. You know, you'll see a really good show.
It's like watching you grow in your collecting and your art, because you love paintings,
Yeah.
which are always beautiful, but there's objects that go on a wall. You understand how they're made. There's a basic format. But Amalia's work, altars in general, are, you know, it's kind of hard you don't really know where they begin or end, especially when you find them in somebody's home.
Yeah, I mean, I love the altars. I understand what they stand for. This is not altars. This installation that's up there right now, and I understand it, but it's spectacular. My breath was taken away, you know, when I saw these. Like, wow, I should have been following her more intently, you know. But Amalia Mesa Baines.
Yeah. I'm doing a talk with her in 2 weeks too.
Oh,
it's
cool.
a weird month.
Tell her I said yo.
But can you say more about that? Because you have focused on paintings for so long, but they're not the funny things my grandfather makes. They're not altars.
Yeah.
So how do you locate the Rasquachismo in paintings? And maybe there's some that come up on here.
I'm trying to figure out if you see it come up, let me know. 'Cause I don't have eyes in the back of my head yet.
Oh, here, this is a good one too. This is Exile off Main Street, Benito Huerta.
Yeah, this is an art conversation, which Chicanos don't really get a chance to do that much in the general art firmament of the museum world. This is a conversation between Picasso and Kandinsky. And Picasso said, according to the artist, Benito Huerta from Texas, that art is everything. And everything you look at and come in contact with is art. And Kandinsky said, art is nothing. And so the one side is
Can we go back to that?
He just did it for the power of mind. He took one of Picasso's most famous paintings, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, and he painted it. And on the other side is a sheet of lead. It weighs 250 pounds, and they hate moving it because it's a heavy bitch. And so there was this conversation going back and forth, and it's kind of the Chicano version of the Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. But we were very fortunate, and Bill Gates came out to see the museum this year. And I was told that he only had time to see 3 paintings, and then he's got to go. Okay, he's busy, he's Bill Gates, you know. And so I was walking him around the museum, and we came to this painting, and I was telling him what I've just told you, what the origins of it is. And the really remarkable, here's where the rasquache element comes in. The really remarkable thing about this painting is the Picasso part is painted on velvet. And he's listening to me, and as soon as I said that, he kind of reached out.
Did you slap him?
Really? No, I was going to see what he did. I said, go ahead and touch it. Yeah, we got your fingerprints now. and he didn't, but he got like that close from it, you know, because he thought he was in his own house. I prefer to think it was the power of the narrative that he would say, but he kind of reached at there. But it was like, I would have done the same thing if there was nobody looking and it wasn't my painting, you know. But that's part of rasquachismo is you know, velvet paintings. I mean, how low on the artistic rung ladder are velvet paintings, but to turn it into this unbelievable work of art, and it's a big piece, you know, and have Bill Gates be kind of entranced to like the power of art to attract, you know, that's it, and that's part of rasquachismo.
But I think even he's doing some, like, I'll call it scholarly rasquachismo too, because you can't ignore the big steel plate. It's
Yeah,
steel, right?
exactly.
So that's like the whole history of minimalism comes in play too. So you have the early 20th century, the middle to late 20th century, all jammed together in this one thing.
What really struck me about this painting is that Chicanos were not considered part of the art conversation, you know, and they all went to, you know, especially the younger ones that are coming up today, but also the originators of it, they all went to prestigious art schools, the Rhode Island School of Design, Chicago Art Institute, you know, so they knew world art, and but they weren't. Their art was not supposed to speak to that conversation. It was supposed to speak to some other elements that they considered Chicano art. You know, it was usually some guy sleeping under a cactus. You know, that's from what they know. And so, you know, it was a remarkable step forward in this painting to, okay, we're going to comment on the state of the art and the art conversation that goes on. Frank Romero does it too in his paintings. He'll reference all kinds of, but they don't even recognize it at first. How can you be part of this conversation? It's in English, you know, kind of. Well, we can, you know, but quietly do it and let your art speak for that.
Yeah. Have you found that Cheech has been a place where that, you know, it's like it's a beautiful brick and mortar place in proximity to LACMA, to all these other, the Getty, these institutions out here. How do you see it a couple years in now being a place for just assuming that Chicano art is part of the American art conversation?
Well, it's becoming well known now for that, because there is a place. In every review that we got earlier when the museum opened 2 years ago, is that finally Chicano art has a museum. Now it's legit, and the reviewer went on to list all these other isms that don't have feminism, blah, blah, blah. They went on, and every one of them didn't have a museum, but they're still considered vaguely part of that conversation. When they have a museum, though, you know, their voice gets louder because you have a place to go and see it. Yeah. You know, it doesn't have to come to you, which I tried to do over the last 25 years, but it's a place where visitors can come, because 85% of the people that have come to the Cheech so far are not from the Inland Empire. Yeah. You know, and I keep having this conversation with city managers. You know, the Olympics is going to be here in 4 years. The world is going to come to Riverside because there's 4 events out there. So we have to come in and do this advertising campaign in order to, well, as long as you're in France, but you're coming to LA, you got to come to see the Cheech. So we're doing that, you know. But it's a long process, museum, and the wheels of the museums grind exceedingly slow. Yes. And they said that when the offer was made to me to do this museum there in Riverside, they said, you're going at warp speed right now. And from the time they offered it me till we opened the doors, that was 5 years. You know, it doesn't go warp speed according to where I come from. That's pretty damn slow, you know. And so we're in that process now, but we're going at warp speed, you know.
I work at the Smithsonian, and you're going warp speed.
Yeah, really, man, you know.
Oh, this is good if you can pause it here too. So this is a document from the Archives of American Arts collection, the Tomás Ibarra-Frausto research material on Chicano art. So we collect papers of artists, collectors, also scholars, which Tomás is one of. This is the catalog, 1989, where Tomás is really, rasquache is a word that's been part of our language forever, always meant what it means, but Tomás, through this essay in 1989, brought it into that conversation we're talking about, the academia, the art conversation. And you can feel ambivalent about why do we need to be there, but we are now, and I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. You know, it is interesting to you know, play against the assumptions of people, you know, and the only way you can really do that, I say, by showing the alternative. Here is what we're talking about, and we have a place to show that now. You know, so that's a big deal.
And one thing I was rereading this and realizing how important, he talks about a lot of art objects, sculptures, paintings, things in yards, but he also talks about Teatro Campesino and the character Don Rasquache, the very flamboyant theatrical character from early 20th century literature. But I've never asked you as a performer, do you find in your comedy, in your acting, in your performance, is there rasquachismo there? Does the sensibility come out in any way?
We are all rasquachismo, man. It's all about that,
What's
man.
the most rasquache performance you've ever done?
Just walking out on stage. I mean, no, really, I mean, who ever thought that the emblems of the hippie generation would be a Chicano lowrider and his half Chinese friend? I mean, here's your hippie generation, you know, like... Ike, you know, like, of course, you know, you're part of that conversation now when you step out on stage, you know, and people that had never knew what a Chicano was or that whole conversation, okay, well, this is what it is. You show them, and you know, and they start learning Spanish. That's why we had some of the titles of our albums in Spanish, Los Cochinos, you know, which kind of speaks for itself as to who we were. We're the unlawful guys, I guess. You know, we're talking about things that you could go to jail for. When we first started off, to like, you know, it's easier to get a pound of weed than 3 pizzas. You know, you'll get it delivered faster.
Yeah.
He's thinking about how can I get that weed.
I'm a faster. You stop there.
You gave me an idea there. Yeah, okay.
Let's see what the next work of art is. The next one, that's my grandpa's orange log and rooster.
Oh, this one.
I think this one speaks to, again, those spaces that are not museums, like storefront windows are a place where we see this all the time.
This is by Cande Aguilar. He's from San Antonio, or where's it? What?
Brownsville.
Fresno?
Brownsville.
Oh, Brownsville, yeah. Hot
Texas.
spot of Chicano art. It is, actually.
Yeah.
He walked by this store every day, and he would see these signs that would change 2 or 3 times a week about what they were have on sale or offering to the public. And he said, what really struck him is if you are what you eat, how are we the same and how are we different? What are the things that we eat in common, and what are the things that we eat that are only specific to our group, you know? And then what is the bleed between them, you know? So this thing said, and these are the posters that they were appeared on in the store, you know. It wasn't he didn't paint these were painted, but he asked the proprietor of the store if he could, you know, use them. Yeah, take all you want, you know. And he said, so when we were putting this up, he said, well, what's the sequence? What's the order of this? Is anything you want, you know, put them up any way you want, you know, because they're going to change every week, you know. So like this is what, and you I don't know what's the most Chicano thing in there, man. Oh yeah,
menudo.
Frozen menudo, man. You know you are in Chicanoville when you have frozen menudo, man. I've never been brave enough to try that, you know.
You see the artistic twist with some of them upside down too.
Yeah, pork stew. I mean, you know, how are we the same and how are we different?
Yeah.
You know, entry fajitas, you know, or skinless fajitas. You know, so that it just struck me when I first saw them. I saw them in a representation. You know, I said these got to be great. You know, and then some people. Yeah, the idea of it, not the actual presentation of it, but the idea of it, oh, you're going to put that up, man. You put that up, everybody that comes to the museum wants their picture taken in front of this. So that's all you need to know.
Yeah. I didn't realize they were found, too. I figured he made them. That's great.
No, they were found objects.
So Barrio Pop, too, you see, again, another intervention in the canon. So pop art, Klaus Oldenburg, who made a store in downtown New York to sell his soft sculptures of food. This is, again, a Chicano artist intervening.
Yeah, this is a guy who grew up playing conjunto music with his family. He was in a band all his life. He's a great accordion player, But he's a multi-talented artist that really had no formal training in painting. But he makes great paintings right now that we've featured in the Cheech. And when you come there, you will see them.
It's also a good piece to remind ourselves of the good Chicano word chillantes, bright colors.
Chillantes, right. Chillanca. All right.
So what's the next work of art? This is a...
What change? Oh, this is the latest.
And I don't know much about this artist.
I didn't either. We went to the Nelson Atkins in Kansas City, which is their LACMA, of Kansas City. It's a big museum, and it has a wonderful collection. And when I went there, they had a kind of a Chicano showing for the first time in their history, and this is one of the pieces. This artist, I'm trying to.
Israel Alejandro Garcia.
Yeah. What it does at the end of it, it's a big piece, and it records the number of people crossing the border at any specific second. And so you have a running count of what is, and then there's all kinds of other symbols of what's going on in regard to that subject. But it's an active piece, and it changes all the time. So, and we got it's on its way here. I understand. It's here. We got it. Okay, on
So
June
June
7th. June 7th, come and see your numbers changing America. But it's a really great piece, and that's because we're now, when we first started, Chicano art was thought to be just in California, and maybe
Texas. Hello.
I was the only guy that was collecting both, because very early in my collecting collecting adventure. I was introduced to the artists of Texas because there was this one woman, Sofia Perez, that had a gallery in San Antonio and was opening a new one in LA. And she found out that I was collecting Chicano art. She got in touch, and she showed me all these great painters from Texas, mostly San Antonio, because it was a big Chicano art scene. And I looked at them, and I said, these are related. These may not be brothers and sisters, but they are definitely cousins. Mm-hmm. It's the same DNA. One's a little more rural, one's a little more urban, but they're talking about the same thing, and their genealogy is the same. And so I said, this is a much bigger movement than when I first started. I thought it was just LA, and then there was San Francisco, but San Antonio. So I started collecting artists from both areas right at the very beginning. So the collection is equally comprised of artists from Texas as well as and now we're expanding into the Midwest, because that's where all the Chicanos are. Chicago is the second biggest collection of Mexicans in the United States. Now, is it the second or third? Houston just came in. That may be second, but for years and years, it was Chicago. And the first time I ever discovered this, Tommy and I were playing a club in Chicago. And between shows, I was hungry. I wanted to get something to eat. And so I look across the street, and there's a Mexican restaurant in Chicago. I go, what are they going to do? Sopa de sauerkraut? Or I was befuddled, man.
Los weenies, hot dog.
Los weenies, yeah. And so I went across the street, and I looked into the restaurant, and it was all Mexicans in there. And typical, the menu was scotch taped on the window, the thing was curling up, but that was the real shit, It was. I said, well, and I looked up and down the street, and there was all Mexican restaurants. And I went back and told the owner of the club, I said, there's Mexican restaurants. I said, well, this is the biggest collection of Mexicans in the United States. Oh, really? And it's blooming in your head when you discover that, and then you see how far the movement went. And what my goal is to have this ongoing and unifying conversation between all those areas, so that, because they didn't know about each other. They knew about each other, but they hadn't connected. They didn't have shows together. They didn't, come and visit each other's art. But now it's happening now because there is a place for them to gather. That's what creates art movements, a place where they can gather and create this art. and make it up. So we're in the process of doing that right now.
Yeah. I want to ask about that. So you went to Nelson Atkins. I know you traveled to other museums a lot. Are you, and I'm finding this, are you finding that, and even the invitation here, Todd, you know, having the show about invention and making the connection to Rasquachismo to make this event, I'm finding that museum professionals around the country are more literate, they can pronounce Rasquachismo, which is nice. That's new.
They can hardly pronounce Cheech. I mean, here's a little inside baseball tip. Mexicans cannot say Cheech. They can say it, you know, chicharron, say chicharron. That's my nickname. Oh, okay, chick. I don't know. Somebody explained it to me one day because of the alphabet and whether but something or other, but they can't say Cheech.
Yeah.
In relation to me.
Yeah. But what are the conversations you're having with museum directors and curators? And
well, you know, it's been an ongoing conversation because when we first started the first tour, which was Chicano Visions, and it was we had to get one museum director to okay the show and say it's gonna, and this is Chicano art, and nobody wanted to put their head on the block, nobody. Not in one, because, you know, they worked a long time to get to the position they are at, and they're not going to, you know, they're going to put their head on the block and say, okay, this is official Chicano art. And so finally, the director from the San Antonio Museum said, I'll be the first. And then it was, he didn't get his head chopped off. As a matter of fact, they broke attendance records and from then on, for every museum but there was still a divide there in San Antonio where there was some segment that said Chicano art could only be political art. It can only be, it can't be about trees or birds or quién sabe qué.
Or Picasso.
Or Picasso, exactly, especially Picasso. But Chicanos are not part of that conversation. So, you know, we kind of changed that narrative and allowed them to be.
Yeah.
No.
Yes. Let's look at one more piece of art, and maybe we'll get into audience Q&A after that, so we can. Oh, I was wondering about this one too. This is some sculpture. I think this is beautiful.
Yeah,
it's
a little piece. It's about this big, you know, and because every time I go to one of these towns, especially like Corpus Christi, which is a big movement in Chicano art right now, and I go there and I go to the various galleries and collectors and artist spaces, you know, that we can go in, and this is Amoret
V. Garza.
This young lady that made this, so I collected some of her pieces, and it's interesting to see how it progresses, you know, because when I was touring the country with Chong from the early 70s all through the 80s, or at the beginning of the 80s, we saw the whole hippie movement or you know, that thing take place across the country because we were in every city, every day, a different city, for years. And you'd come back the next year and you say, oh, this. We'd ask them, take us to Hippie Town. Every time we went to a place, take us to Hippie Town. Sometimes it was like 3 houses in a row. And that was it, you know. And the next year we'd come and it would be 2 blocks of hippies. The next time it come, it was a whole neighborhood. Now that's a hippie neighborhood. And we saw that happening all over the country, all the time, you know. So like we if you have the expression, I got my finger on the pulse, we had our finger on the pulse because we saw it every day, you know, and we went to all 50 states.
Yeah.
And so we saw how the country was changing and how they were getting ready for some things and they will never be ready for some things, you know. So it was an interesting thing, but we saw that the spread of Chicanismo in various places only preceded by Mexican food. You know, because you could those days you could go to any city or country, any city or town had Chinese restaurants everywhere. You could always get a Chinese meal wherever you go, and now you could always get a a Mexican meal in Ames, Iowa, or North Carolina, or something. So you saw that palette of the people changing year after year, and when Mexicans, I was making a movie in New York, and I was living down in Tribeca. And I go out to the coffee guy, the Greek coffee guy across the street, and get my coffee in the morning. And I call my friend and says, there's a lot of Mexicans here in New York. He says, no, they're Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Cubans. They've been in forever. He says, no, these are Mexicans. Yeah. There's banda music playing that I could hear from 2 blocks away. These are Mexicans. And so when I thought Mexicans would never come to New York because it's too cold. I mean, what self-respecting Mexican wants to freeze together in New York? I don't think so. But everywhere you go now, everywhere you go, yeah. So it's great to see that happening.
Yeah. Maybe it's in your collection. Who made Melissa Make Tacos Not War? The neon light piece. It's in Chicago on view all the time at the Mexican. It's not Patrick, you would think. Anyway, it's you could Google Make Tacos Not War. It's a cool neon light piece by a great artist who I'll remember his name later.
Whoever his name is.
Whoever his name.
Anonymous.
I love this one too, because the same way that, Mexicanos took the Virgin Mary and made La Guadalupe, this syncretic image, seems like some kind of evolution of that, of spiritual iconography run through the rasquache machine.
Exactly.
Yeah. Also with the Yiddish title, Chachki.
Chachkis. Yeah. Cochinadas.
So we have time for some audience questions. There are microphones available, so please raise your hands. We have a question here, the LA hat.
Yeah, right there.
Question, how did you get into art collection?
Oh, wow.
That started young.
That's very young, at a very young age. I had this group of cousins. There was 4 of us, and we were all pretty bright kids. We went to Catholic school, which was for me a liberal arts education with corporal punishment. Everybody ever went to Catholic school knows what I'm talking about. And so my cousin Louis, who was the oldest cousin, bright guy, really, he got a scholarship to grade school. Really, I'd never heard of that. Got a scholarship to grade school, high school, college, every school he ever went to, and University of Tokyo, really bright guy, and a writer, and a poet, and an athlete, and good looking, and it was like the one you looked up to. And he gathered these four of us together, and he says, okay, we're gonna learn other subjects besides the one they teach in school. And we're going to be expert in those, and I'm going to assign each of you a subject, and you go out and learn all about it and bring it back to the group. And I got assigned art, and I was the youngest. I thought, okay, Cheech, you go learn about how do you do that? All right, I'm going to go to the library. That's why I'm always associated with the library here. And
first library card here, right?
I got my first library card from this library. I lived right down the street on 36 in San Pedro, and so by my first. But where was I? I was.
You're getting books and the Gauguin books. I know is a part of
it. The 4 of us. We said, how do I do? I go to the library to learn about art, and so I was maybe 10, just turning 10 about that time.
And art books are heavy.
No shit. That's why I had my slaves working for me. I went, and so I started, just taking out art books and looking at them. I knew I wanted to stay close to the ones that were religious in tone, because that's what I was used to. I was raised Catholic, and then, you go to the church and you look up at the ceiling, and these guys walking around in the clouds with sheets, and then why are they barbecuing that guy in the corner? Right away, I'm intrigued, If you've ever seen Mexican comic books, you're intrigued by that duality. And so I started going to, and then one of the head librarian kind of noticed me one day, and because I'd always go on a Saturday, and she says, I see you coming in here, but what are you doing? And I told her, well, I'm trying to learn about art. I'm supposed to learn about art. Well, what kind of art? I don't know. Is there other kinds? So other kinds, art is art. She says, no. Well, She called to her assistant over and says, this young man is trying to learn about art. Can we help him? Sure. And so every Saturday I would go there and they'd have a stack of books, you know. Okay, this is going to learn about Gauguin today. Okay, I like Gauguin. He's cool. He hangs out with brown people, you know. This is, yeah. And that's how I worked my way up through the history of art in Western art. So by the time I got to the position where I had money and could buy art, that's when I discovered the Chicano painters, you know, because I was always a collector of something all my life. Baseball cards, bottle caps, buttons, matchbook covers, anything. I had this penchant for getting the whole set, you know. So, okay, Chicano art. Oh, I like this guy, and I like the guys next to him, and that's a woman over at Patsy Valdez. That was her. Okay, I'm going to get some of her. So I started doing that, you know, because I had discretionary income. You know, which is, hit records do that for you, you know. Yeah. And so I started collecting that, and so until I kept, you know, and then traveling. That's what made it different, because I could go to Corpus Christi where artists couldn't get gallery representation in their own town. And I could discover them, I could buy the work, and I could bring it to LA and show it in all these other shows I was doing. And so that made a lot of sense. But for me, it was the best art out there. Yeah. It was the art that I related to, first of all, but I thought it was the best art out there because the art world was going through not an abstract period, but whatever that is, that they don't recognize painting. You know, because painting comes and goes in vogue in the museum world. You know, sometimes it's really cool, and sometimes, it's painting. We don't do that. You know.
It's died many times.
Yes, but it's resilient because every single museum I've ever been to has paintings. You know, a majority of their artwork is paintings, so I started doing that. And so as it went on, you know, my friends that I started meeting in the art world said, well, you have to show these. They're not doing you any good under the bed or in the closet, you know. How do you do that? Well, you get a museum to put on a show. Okay, how you do that? And you got to talk to them first. And what the big impediment was, it's a very expensive process, very expensive. And so, you know, I'm doing okay, but I don't know if I'm doing that okay, you know. And so I went around and looked for sponsors. You had to have sponsors, and it took me a long time to find the sponsor. A lot of groups, I give my little pitch in front of every boardroom in the United States, and do my little song and dance, and they're very intrigued and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, they got what's called shell-out falter. When they had to shell out, they faltered. You know, until one time, finally, I was doing this, and the Target stores stepped up to the plate, and Hewlett-Packard, and they put up the money for the first building the first show, which was an expensive process. And then the Target store stayed with us for the next 7 years as we toured major museums around the United States. You know, and at this point, celebrity comes into the play. You know, I because I had a celebrity name and a presence there, they were willing to listen to me, or they were willing to take a chance. You know, because his name will draw some people to see this art. You know, and so that was a big, you know, because. Joe Blow could have the exact same collection and go to a museum, and how many people is Joe Blow gonna? Yeah. Because we don't know about Chicano art anyways. Yeah. You know, so how's that gonna work? So I used that celebrity in order to get into the. But once that started opening in these museums, we broke attendance records in every single museum, from San Antonio to the Smithsonian. You know, so. It was we were on our way, you know, and there was a place to officially see Chicano art. Yeah. You know, so it was a big deal. And then after that show you know, came down, I said, well, I want to keep this going, this process going. This is really cool. People are digging it, you know. Yeah. So I subdivided the collection into smaller categories. Works on paper, works by women, works just from Texas artists, and I could play these smaller museums that didn't have such a lead time in order to get in. In order to get into any major museum, even if they want you, that's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. You know, that's a long time, you know. But the smaller museums, you could get in right away, you know, and especially now with the celebrity came in again. You know, I had that experience from being on the road and being with Cheech and Chong. In small towns, and we'd pack them in, you know. Bigger towns had a lot of choices, but we did that, and we played before even we had the museum. We had played in over 50 museums around the country. So now that big Chicano thing was spreading. Now people knew how to even say Chicano. So we kept going to that. And I was doing a show at the Riverside Art Museum. I think it was a Works on Paper show, and once again it broke all attendance records, and they had to repurpose the town library building, and it was it is a beautiful mid-century building, beautiful, and they were looking for us, and they were down the road with some children's groups or children's science museum, and that wasn't going through, and so a city manager, after we did the show, which was a big show for them, came up with this idea: why don't we offer the museum to Cheech for the collection? He'll give us the collection. Important point, and we'll display it. It'll be the only thing in the museum. And when he came to me and presented that, I didn't know what he was talking about at first. You want me to buy a museum? I'm doing pretty good, but I don't know if I'm museum rich yet. And no, we want to give you the museum for the collection. You give us the collection. And we'll take care of it, and it'll be the only thing, and it'll be the first Chicano museum. And I had put this collection together over 50 years. Give it to him. But as I thought about it more and more, and what I wanted to establish is the legitimacy of Chicano art. I wasn't doing this for any profit. Thank you. So the legitimacy was the more you're doing it just to make a bunch of money, you're going to put it up and then sell them on. I've never sold a piece. Yeah. To this day, never happened. I never will. I got a museum. I don't need to sell it. But it was, and people were very suspicious, especially the Chicanos. What are you getting out of that?
Yeah.
I'm getting out to see you smile. That's what I'm getting out of this, and I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And some of the early reviews that came out after we opened is they reviewed every painting and who the designation was for. Was it for the museum or for me personally? And they found out that 9 out of every 10 paintings were donated to the museum because Michael Govan, who's the director of LACMA, is a good friend of mine. I'm on the board, and he's been a champion of Chicano art ever since he came to this town. And he said, if you're going to give art to a museum, make it your best. Because do you want your Chicano art or whatever thing that you're promoting to be seen by the least of the works of art? They should be represented by the best.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, that's a very good question. And yeah, just for context, the artists have always been there. Like in 1977, there's Dale Gas, the exhibition in Houston, the Cara exhibition in the 90s. So the museums, the big encyclopedic museums were catching on. The collectors were the missing link because it's so expensive. So Cheech, Armando Duron, others you're bringing us into the full ecology of the art world by being these collectors. So I think we have time for at least one more question.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Dale Shine?
Yes, can we, go, please change the image to Dale Shine.
Screen to Dale Shine. Okay, don't.
Keep going. Keep going. That's Amalia. Dale Shine. There it is. Jesse Rodriguez.
Dale Shine. Give me shine.
Yay.
Can you stand up, take a bow? Take a bow. Ready? Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks for coming.
thank you for coming. Also representing Texas, we have Mario Esquivel, the son of Jose Esquivel, the
Hey,
painter.
Esquivel, stand up and think about. Siempre, ándale.
What's that? Armando Donald's here. Oh, amazing. Hey!
Hey! Ándale, vato.
I'm glad I said something nice about Armando. Maybe we do have time for one more
Yeah,
question.
we'll just have one
We
more.
got one? Okay, I saw this hand. Do we have?
Hey,
There's a microphone. Here's, it's coming, it's coming.
it's coming.
Because we have a live stream audience, remember?
Thank you.
Hi, I came with my son. And I have like a question that's kind of like for him and myself. Like, what advice do you have for young artists and young collectors? Because my child, he was originally going to be an engineer at UCLA, but then he was like, Mom, I'm not feeling it. And I was like, okay, let's do some research. What do you want to do? And he's like, art. And I was like, okay. So he ended up getting a scholarship at Otis College. So super
Yes.
proud of him.
Very good.
He was too shy to bring a piece, but that's why I'm asking, like, how do you give him that oomph?
How did they get in your collection, Cheech, is what she's not asking.
He has a bong. He's known as the bong guy.
Yeah, how do you get in my collection? Crawl on your
Sorry.
knees. You know, keep making work and somehow get it in front of me, and then I'll see it. You know, and I'll make a decision then, whether it's something I want for the museum, and it fits into a certain narrative that we're building around in this whole story, you know, because that's what we're going for. But keep painting or keep drawing or whatever it is that your art is doing. Do it, and as you can, if you can get it in front of as many people as possible, do that. And it's the same advice I give to people who come up and want to be actors. How do I do that? Because being an actor is a hard way to make a living. Being a painter is a really hard way to make a living, you know, so you have, and it's a, but I tell the actors, get on stage everywhere, anytime you can. If it's 2 people to 2,000 people, get on board. We used to call it miles on boards. You know, you got to get on the boards and practice your art, and it gets better. The more you do it, the better it gets. I don't care what kind of art you're making. If you do it, there's going to be a point during that process where you're going to say, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to go this way, you know. And just when you're writing a script, I've written many scripts, and you have this idea of how the story is going to turn out and how these characters are going to be, and you start writing, and the characters take over, and they just take over. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be this guy, you know. And you find it's an automatic process. So keep doing what you're doing and get it in front of as many people as you possibly can. There's shows that you can get hooked up to, especially in the Chicano world. Go to those places where they feature it, to Self-Help Graphics here in LA, to the Cheech in Riverside, you know, and we'll get it.
So I think we have to wrap up. Jessica? Oh.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Can you give the interpreter the mic? One quick question.
Yeah, of course.
I'm curious. I'm curious as to where your nickname Cheech came from.
Thank you. It's Cheech is short for chicharron, and when I was a little baby and I was being brought home from the hospital and I was laying in the crib, my Uncle Bono looked in the crib and says, "Ay, parece un chicharrón," man. A little curled up, I see. You know? And so that became my name in the family from I can remember, you know, Chicharron. Everybody in my family had a nickname, You know, so my cousin Louis, there was a genius, Seco. I don't know why he was called Seco, but Yaya or something, you know, but it was my nickname.
Thank you.
Because Mexicans can say chicharron, they just can't say chic. Or they can't say chic.
Or Roni.
Coroni.
Thank you, Cheech.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. It's cool. Right? Thank you very much, buddy.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Cheech. Thank you, Todd, for putting this together. Thank you all for being here. We hope to see you again very soon.
Thanks
you.
everybody for coming. Okay, support your local Chicano artist. I'll be there.